I'll take that as that we're ready. Welcome, everyone, and I'd like to call to order the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force meeting, steering committee meeting for February 15th, 2024, and we are meeting in a hybrid format. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people, who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Welcome, everybody. Like I said, I'm just arrived yesterday, so I'm a little jet lagged, but welcome. We have a few things on our agenda this morning. The first one, of course, is assigned to me. Thank you, Jill. Is the, oh no, sorry, it's leadership. So, Jill?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. This first agenda item, I wanted to, on the committee structure, give everyone here today an opportunity to consider the current IPRTF committee structure, whether that's still working for everyone or whether adjustments need to be made as we're going through this significant change on the IPRTF. One of the questions that has come up is whether the existing committees will take on any of the work of the Justice Project, the 15 projects therein. Barry, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Well, I know some of the conversations we have, we just don't know where some of those elements will land, especially with respect to our committee structure. Certainly this committee would be the appropriate place for things to be funneled through because that's what we do. But I think it was a question of capacity and kind of what we were going to lean into as far as facilitation or some of the things that Jill and I have been, and Tyler have been working on as far as the scope of work for the JPOP and associated extra work for the task force that's been generated by the Justice Project. So I don't know that we know everything yet, but I think we need to be flexible in looking at our committee structure. We're certainly going to have a JPOP that's going to be something new for us that we're going to be probably starting up in the next couple of months, I hope. And that will have to be some new effort and some new committee piece to our work. So that's about all I can say now. I know, Jill, you've done a great job of helping Tyler and I kind of move along in the thought process in this. So do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, it would be helpful for me as I write the scope of work for our facilitator to get some feedback from you guys as the committee chairs about whether or not you want to take on some of these projects in your committee, or would you rather, or will the IPRTF, do you think, rather just put all of the work on the Justice Project on the JPOP? So
Well, and that JPOP could be part of a larger subcommittee too, that could be a Justice Project subcommittee even.
that's something that we'll have to talk about that in planning committee. That's yeah.
Okay.
So that kind of guidance from the committee chairs would be helpful for me in figuring out what you're all thinking.
Raylene?
Raylene, you're muted.
I'm learning how to mute and unmute myself all over again. So yesterday in the Legal and Justice Subcommittee, the JPOP, the programs and the status on that was asked that we could either do a monthly report or a quarterly report to the Legal and Justice Subcommittee. I have an idea a lot of the members of the Legal and Justice may be somewhat integrated in that, but at least a status report or where we're moving and then try to figure out how we're going to integrate that with the Legal and Justice Subcommittee. Because if a lot of the members are already going to hear it once, I don't know how much they're going to want to hear it again, but at this point, there's just a lot of questions and people want to know what's going on and how to move forward.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Barry and Jill. We created a subcommittee for the Crisis Stabilization Center, and that was a really good call. Smaller effort, though, one could argue, than J-POP. So having its own subcommittee, I think, makes a ton of sense. I think people have posited maybe setting it within a different one, but I think creating its own just would make the most sense.
Other thoughts? So Paul, we got a great email this morning from Kayla talking about a grant that's going to be used for your data center startup, but there was some additional funding that could be available, excuse me, for this kind of a facilitation effort. Could you give us a little more on that? You're muted.
I can't because I have not been involved with that. She's been working. I've been working some other things, so I need to get updated myself.
Okay. Anyway, it was good news. We don't know the
Yeah,
details yet, but it was good news that there would be at least some partial funding for the effort going forward for our consultant. So that's one thing we can report.
Yeah.
Other things on J-POP, Jill?
Yeah, so, well, on the committee structure, there was also discussion about possibly moving the legal and justice system to quarterly, and there was also discussion about expanding the scope of the crisis stabilization facility to take on that role for both the 23-hour facility and the jail medical center facility. So any feedback on direction about that would be helpful.
How do committee chairs, I guess in general, feel about their meeting schedules right now and their frequency of meeting and so on? Anybody?
So, the Legal and Justice Subcommittee, there's a lot of individuals that are extremely busy that are very essential to those meetings. And that's one of the reasons I think we cut it down to an hour. And going through and doing it hourly once a month seems to be somewhat reasonable, but we're still running in different directions, and I'm sure Caleb feels that too. As we're trying to learn a bunch of things, and we've got the biennium budget coming up this year, and we're all in different roles. I think quarterly might be more beneficial for legal and justice, because I think it's important to make sure the key players are available because we want their input. But I don't know if it's realistic to have them there every month, or even if we went bi-monthly, but I'm sure Dan and Caleb could probably weigh in on that to see if what their thoughts were. And it could be something I could bring back to just the Legal and Justice Committee and say, what would your preference be?
Dan?
Yeah, I can speak to the behavioral health subcommittee to some extent. We kind of had to do a bit of a reset. We lost some membership over the course of the last several months due to attrition, with people moving to different positions. So Michael from Lake Wacom, I think he started his own practice, and Mr. Cochran from the school district moved from Bellingham to Ferndale. We lost his membership, and so Mike Parker and I have been kind of talking a little bit. I don't know, not behind the scenes, but just talking about how do we expand and diversify our membership, and what kind of members are we looking for? And so we've had offsite meetings, or an offsite meeting with a person that is an SUDP, or not SUDP, but he's like a behavioral health human services instructor at Wacom, and I think that could be a promising lead in terms of involving that person on membership. And then Stephen Gockley reached out to Mike and I to see if he could join the committee. So there are things like we're resetting is what I'm trying to say here. And as far as the frequency of meetings, I think that the monthly structure can work for us. There's a lot going on in behavioral health. We know that we've got 7 ODs per day in Bellingham alone, and so we have a whole body of work that's happening. And in the news the other day, it came out that the city are going to be talking to the owner of what's commonly referred to as the Walmart encampment, a sprawling encampment that is I don't know, 100 to 200 people. And so there's just a lot going on when it comes to these kind of social issues that the behavioral health committee can really lean into. And so my preference, and Mike, I don't want to speak for you, but if my preference would be to maintain our monthly schedule and maintain our quarterly meetings with legal and justice because of the overlap on the issues. And that's just where I'm at right now.
Thanks, Dan. Perry?
100% in agreement. And so I think we're leaning into it more and wanting to put more effort into it, and have a little bit more toothsome agendas. Jill, of course, has been an amazing support, but I think 2024 is going to be a pretty dynamic year. So we want to keep that foot on the pedal.
Yeah. And hey, just real quick follow-up. I've got to so it's 11:14 right now. I've got to walk across the street to Options High School and give a presentation to their civics class at 11:30. So I need to step out probably at 11:25. So about 10 more minutes you got me for.
Hey, well, that's cool. Good for you, Dan.
Yeah.
Perry?
Yeah, I think that folks are aware that the Crisis Stabilization Center subcommittee meets quarterly, or sometimes with, Jill's grace, quarterly plus a month, if I'm on vacation, that kind of thing. And I think it's wise, honestly, at least at this point, to also include sort of a report out or an update, discussions, et cetera, for the 23-hour Crisis Relief Center. I am part of the project team, been invited to in the exec's office to, be a part of those discussions and so forth, which, again, makes sense. There's lots of, building plans and et cetera, and I'm more oriented towards the operational aspect of that. So I think that that's a great idea. Honestly, at the, kind of what's happening and the speed that things are happening relative to the 23-hour Crisis Relief Center, probably quarterly at this point is often enough to bring updates and, and that sort of thing. We could, obviously bring it to the behavioral health subcommittee. I'm a member of the behavioral health subcommittee as well, and so could certainly bring that information and material there if there was something more, immediate that could be shared, there. So just wanted to pop in with my thoughts about that.
Thank you, everyone.
And just one more committee I just wanted to touch on is index, and how I know we're looking for what that committee is going to do. And a lot of that's going to depend on what the data team that Sat Paul's crew's bringing on, how that's going to interface with this whole data, or the whole data side, of the task force work. So Caleb, do you have any thoughts on the index?
Yeah, I mean, we've largely not met. It was a combination of things. Some being not having a body of material to go over for the vast majority of the time. Going forward, I do not have the personal capacity to maintain the chair position in the committee. So I'm happy to be, sort of an expert that people can reach out to and help. Still go to the meetings and so forth, but I find myself being pulled in many directions, as Verlaine pointed out earlier. So as to how often we meet, I think that every other month is still what our schedule is, and I think that that's probably okay as long as we're on top of canceling meetings as we don't have to continue to meet if there's nothing to talk about. I think we find that there are a lot of people who have busy schedules. And when we meet just to meet, there isn't a lot to talk about. So
Well, I certainly don't want to commit anything resources out of the executive's office, but I think there is going to be a large role for that person in the data center, at least the initial person with the task force. So, Paul, does that sound okay to you?
Uh,
Oh,
and
there you
we
go.
are committed. Like, if you remember, more than a year ago, we made that promise that we will have. And I think this is beneficial not only to this committee or this thing, this is beneficial all across our county, because more we strengthen that, more type of data we can collect. So this is our initial uh, step to get into data. And once JD Edward is updated, our financial system, that would be another string of data on the money side available to a lot of different issues and a lot of different things. But definitely, we would strengthen this, Barry,
Okay.
in the coming months and years.
That sounds good. I love that partnership to make sure that yeah. Thank you, Paul. Mike?
I'm really pleased to hear Executive Sadhu's words and more pleased that you got funding to be able to support that work. I'm going to pull a Stephen and just kind of remind us of some commitments we made regarding racial equity and data. And those two things are really inextricably linked. You cannot separate them. Without data, without knowing who's moving through our criminal legal system, we can't highlight either good spots and celebrate good work or figure out where our trouble spots are. So I'm glad to hear that even though there isn't too much bandwidth, Caleb, I'm glad that you're still stewarding that, because I think it's extremely critical. I'm a little dismayed to hear that we don't have enough to talk about, but I think I kind of know why you made that statement, and I think it kind of makes sense. I really hope that changes in 2024. We haven't done a lot of at least overt work implementing our racial equity toolkit, but I think if 2024 can be a time in which we can really attack this data question, I think we can really start to make good on some of those efforts and begin to learn a lot about that. And I just want to offer, and I don't know how useful this is, Caleb, to when you start or when things get more active on index and who ends up chairing that, if it's ever useful to to have anybody from behavioral health come join some of your meetings, or to at least to provide kind of some of our wish list things or input, if that's ever helpful, we would like to support that committee work. And I'd love to see it in 2024 get a little more robust and toothsome if we could.
Thanks, Mike. I don't know what the filter you have is. It is so cool. It's such a 1962 black and white look on my screen. I love it. Caleb.
I wish I could claim tech skills. It just kind of works. I'm glad it works.
Yeah, so I know it's disheartening to hear that there's not a lot to talk about it, and it's not every meeting. I think what happened is, there were really large efforts early days in Index to come up with a set of functional emailing options that were sent out to local partners in the criminal justice landscape. For example, City of Bellingham gets emails every single day and every single week that have very meaningful and purpose-driven efforts to inform everybody in the community about who's in jail and why they're here, and things that are very intentional for those agencies. As we moved along, though, we started to say, okay, what information can be shared? Can we modify the website? So we changed websites and upgraded a bunch of things on that front. And then with guidance and discussion from folks from the Chuckanut Health Foundation, we were saying, okay, let's look at some dashboard options for showing some of those demographic breakdowns that certainly have racial components very clearly delineated and categorized year over year, going back to early days of Spillman. So we've got 2014 to present data that is captured, and you can get a little bit more granular with each of the data components in a dashboard setting. So now we've come to the kind of the end, or at least finishing line for that major push. And even though it's not public yet, it is down to data validation, testing, and making sure that we've got infrastructure in place to put it on the website. And so when we get to the, I'm not saying we're at the finish line, but we get to a finish line on a product, we're going, okay, what else is out there that we need to accomplish? And until now, there hasn't been a large amount of discussion about things that we wanted to answer through index. And, you know, I certainly have said year over year over year that we need more, you know, more categorical information from all across the criminal justice landscape, all in one big pile that we can sift through and say, hey, these are the things that we're seeing across the board. Simply focusing on the jail isn't enough. There's a lot more things that could be gathered, and a lot more systems that could be reintegrated or integrated into a larger whole. So a database or a repository for information, a data mining system, and a person or persons who can do that work has been my advocacy for the last few years. And that has started to come to fruition. And thankfully, again, like you said earlier, I'm heartened to hear what the executive is saying, and the council's funding the operation as well. So things are happening, good things are happening, but it's difficult on an index meeting to go, all right, anybody got anything to say? And it's not often that I get a lot of feedback. So I feel like I'm just talking to myself. So hopefully that will be better in future.
Yeah, so appreciate what you're doing, and I guess a kind of a follow-up, Caleb, given that your job duties are busy, swirling, and multifaceted. What about recruitment to continue the chair work? And Councilmember Buchanan, I don't know if you wanted to talk about that now. It seems like kind of germane to committee leadership and structure and things like that. But obviously, we'll have another leadership position to fill if to chair that group.
That's an excellent segue into the second part of this agenda item, which is leadership. And what we have to do, a task right before us that we need to do at our next task force meeting is select a new chair, co-chair, whatever that looks like this year. We need to do that soon. I would say our next meeting. So any ideas about, I mean, it's just, the process is easy, nominate and vote, but do we have any thoughts on this committee about folks we would like to, you know, lift up? Or do you have, what are your thoughts about selecting leadership for going forward? Mike?
I've been talking a lot, but I figured that would give somebody else who's nodding maybe some time to think. So very briefly, Barry, I know you discussed a little bit, and when Jack and Stephen were still with us, we discussed the idea of facilitation. Is that exclusive to a JPOP kind of, you know, subcommittee, or was that something being entertained for the task force work as a whole?
It is. I missed the last leadership meeting because I think I was traveling, and but that was definitely discussed, and we're going to come back to you with that. But I think I'm leaning into the task force having that facilitation. I think would be valuable, especially if it was our friends that have been working with us all along. That the task force would benefit highly from having a facilitation effort, you know, overall, not just the JPOP. So, Jill, can you give us anything from the last planning team meeting that I missed?
Off the top of my head, the first draft scope that I put together for the facilitator did include some project management and facilitation of the IPRTF and the Justice Project as a whole. There wasn't a lot of interest in that, so the second version of the scope that I put together at the last meeting for the planning team was just JPOP facilitation only. And I've heard from some of those members offline that there is interest in including the IPRTF for facilitation. So I think it's going to be some kind of a combination of the two. I think there's going to be more than just the JPOP facilitation, but maybe less project management of the whole justice project as a whole. So we're defining who those project managers are going to be for each of the 15 projects. So our facilitator then will have a roster of people that he or she or they will work with once they come on board.
That's kind of what I figured where we were at. It was there's still some discussions to be had in the planning team meetings. But I'm certainly leaning in towards making sure that we have all the resources we need to really, make this an effective, going forward, that we're very effective. Anything else on leadership, or do we just say, hey, nominations are open on the floor? I mean, I don't know how that's going to go, but any thoughts?
As far as the whole IPRTF, I don't know. I think that we've got new membership. It's possible that we would see people who are interested in stepping into that role. As far as the committee chair for Index, I believe we had somebody who was volunteering to assist in that role. We did not have a quorum to make that official, in that process. So Jill can speak to what we're supposed to do from there, but we didn't have enough people to make that work.
Yeah, it was Peter Frazier who stepped up and volunteered to take over the index committee from my recollection, Caleb. And he's a new IPRTF member. So that might be a possibility at the meeting, at the upcoming IPRTF meeting, is just to see if he wants to take over the chair of the index committee. If nobody steps up as chair for the IPRTF, then I think the process would have to be that the IPRTF would have to elect someone each meeting to run that meeting. So that would just be the procedural way to handle things if we don't have a chair. And then Barry and I would continue to lean on the steering committee to schedule those agendas.
Yeah, that sounds good, Jill.
So Jill, just to clarify really quick, that would be kind of like a stopgap. We could do that for such a time and not to rush. Obviously I don't have somebody off the top of my head, or I would have blurted it out, and I would have probably approached Barry, at least you, about that concept. I don't. It's not because it's not really important. I think it's really important. I think for the task force, I think it's going to get even busier, more dynamic, and more valuable. To be really honest, I think this is going to be a hot ticket in town. But I feel some chagrin that I don't have a great suggestion for that. I really wanted other things to be able to continue, and that just wasn't able to be that way. But if it comes down to we need to guest facilitate for a while to give us a little bit of time to make that approach. And Jill, since we're hearing that your contract negotiations might or may not affect this given thing, maybe that is a prudent course. And I'd volunteer if needed to be, if you're going to rotate amongst like the subcommittee co-chairs, which might make the most sense, but I don't know what you all think. We could volunteer to take a stint.
That's a good idea, because I was going to volunteer to do it too. So, all the subcommittees could do that in a rotation if we need to make that decision. I agree, Mike. We don't want to make a bad decision or rush a decision. It'd be better to just, especially we don't know what the facilitator scope is going to be and how much pressure that would take off the chairs. So.
Yeah, it sounds like we'll know more reasonably quickly. So maybe we do this for a couple of months if folks agree, and take a stint, and then that gives us time to figure out the next state.
Yeah. Anything else on the leadership piece? Okay, the Justice Project Implementation Plan. We've talked a lot about that already. I know one thing I'm excited about is Caleb has invited several of us to go back to Ohio to see a new facility in late April. And I'm excited about that to see. Do you know what sparked your interest in them, Caleb? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so we've been doing kind of collectively a national search for who's building correctional facilities in the nation. We've compiled a list of facilities that have been built in, say, the last about 10 years. And it's not exhaustive, but it is a fairly thorough product. And we just went through those items and said, which of these has the most, forward thinking, the most behavioral health components, the most, trauma informed design, and all of the key concepts that we're looking for as a community. And actually, one of my lieutenants came to me and said, hey, there's this facility in Ohio that has a virtual tour on YouTube. I think you should check it out. He played me a video, and I was like, that sounds exactly like the kind of thing that our community would really, really support. And so I've gone through the video probably way too much and looked at each component and took stills of each of the components in the facility and trying to kind of deconstruct it from a design aspect. But throughout the facility, they did a couple of things. Number one, they went all over the nation and looked at facilities. They put their eyes on them and said, what are other people doing in corrections today? They partnered with the National Institute of Corrections early on in the process to help their whole community kind of walk through that process of building a new facility. And the National Institute of Corrections actually does have a kind of a pathways program where they start with community education and what are all the steps involved. And so that was a really crucial element. And then the other thing that they did is they said, well, again, we're going to steal good ideas from some of these other places. So they ended up with trauma-informed care and trauma-informed design. They also, as an entire agency, bought into a concept called strategic inmate management. And strategic inmate management is a concept that comes from the National Institute of Corrections. And they took that and they wove that throughout the entire design of the facility. It was, again, music to my ears to hear them saying things like trauma-informed design and natural light. They've got all of the spaces that are possible have natural beauty incorporated into the space. So you've got either pictures or murals incorporated into as much space as possible. They've got atypical construction methods and texture. They've also done a bring the services to the inmates versus the inmates to the services conversation. And they've co-located as much as they could in housing units. And again, all of these things were very much music to my ears. And then I reached out to their agency and said, hey, do you guys do tours? Can we bring a contingency to check out your space and shamelessly steal your ideas? So that's kind of the progression of events. And I'm kind of a mad scientist. I've got all these little drawings and I'm trying to figure it all out in my office here. But that's kind of how things went for me and how we got to where we're at today.
That's awesome, Caleb. But I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of eyes on us. When I was in DC, I must have had 20 or 25 people from all across the nation, all across our state, come up and ask me, how did you guys do it? And that was just about the ballot measure, right? So people are excited about what we're doing. I'm telling you. And for us to get knowledge from partners across the country and for us to share knowledge across the country, I think is a super, super good opportunity. So thank you for that.
Caleb, real quick, where is that facility in Ohio?
The facility's in Franklin County, which is
Okay.
Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
One thing I didn't mention, which is that I've started meeting with some of the leadership in Columbus and in Nashville, and we've added in other partners who are in different stages along this process to try and say, hey, look, what does this look like for me or for our agency or our community 4, 5, 6 years down the road? What are some pitfalls that we should be avoiding? And we're kind of collaborating on these efforts. So that's been really positive as well.
Okay. So I think as part of these this is pretty much going to be a standing item in most of our agendas. This, the Justice Project Implementation Plan. I'd also like to create a space for the executive's office. I'm not going to put you on the spot today unless you want to.
I want to.
Oh, good, because I think we have to. Everybody's got to kind of tell us what's going on in their world.
And I think this is one of the important tasks we have, because our promise was that by June that we should have a couple of things accomplished. The first thing is that by June we want to have the jail use agreement with all the cities. If you remember that we were able to work with cities a lot through early 2023, that how should we finance this thing? Because this will be the biggest project ever taken up by the county, and biggest borrowing ever done by the county. So we are very concerned to be very conservative, so that if we take upon something like this, that we do it successfully. And so I will give you an overview. The idea was that we proposed first 4 to 6 years that all the cities and county money will pool the money, because by law, cities automatically get 40% and we get only the 60%. So we had worked out with them that their 40%, they will also put it into jail implementation plan fund, right? So which will be approximately give and take $50 million. That's a lot of money in 6 years. The idea is that if that money is done, so when the time, because in initial years, we will not be spending money. We will be collecting the money and putting it in. Construction will start probably 27, 26 sometime. And that's when we will need, and money will be needed over 18 months, not in one day. So having a bond sitting and doesn't do us any good, but we end up paying interest on it. So we thought that we'll collect this money when the time comes for the bond. We'll say, instead of 150 million, please don't hold me to these numbers. I'm just picking some numbers.
Yeah.
Instead of 150 million borrowing for the jail, we need only 100, because we already have 50 as a down payment, right? So great concept, very innovative, and has, I don't think I have seen any example done like that. So now is the crunch time. We have started with cities. Actually, in January, we have built a spreadsheet, whereas the Forrest from the Bellingham, Scott Cordheis for all the small city mayors, and Tyler. They've been working through and everything. One of the requests has been, excuse me, from City of Bellingham, that they would like to get some money, because remember, this money can only be used for public safety. They cannot take this and do something. So we are very careful about supplanting and all that. So, but city feels that if they can get some money, and they will participate in the fentanyl and some of the other things, behavioral health crisis and things. We as a county have put in $4 million into the 23-hour facility, which is part of the behavioral health thing. Because people coming to us saying, oh, we can't wait 6 years to start spending money on the behavioral health. That is not true. We have a $9 million behavioral health fund. And if city, a piece of this money is given to cities, they will do that, and we will get grants. We have been getting grants and other sources. So we will not let the behavioral health component out in the open, that we don't want to spend money on that and only on construction. So we are very carefully balancing that. So one of the idea is that if we take 75% of the city money, means 40%, 75% of that, and give the 25% of money back to the cities for the period of time, like we're talking 4-6 years, we still have enough money what we are trying to do, the unknowns at this time. I just wanted to expand on this because you should see that how many things we have to balance. We don't have the exact estimate of the jail cost. We do not know the interest rate on the bond, right? So those are the things we are determining. So we are, as fast as we do this agreement, we will provide provisions for that so that we don't get caught 2 years from now. So it's a little complicated, but we are working with and everybody is very cooperative and wanting to make this successful. So that's what the second thing. What we will do in June, we will have a timeline. Okay, this we will have the groundwork done. Geotechnical and mitigation. We are already started working with the city of Ferndale for our permits, and this is the date for that. And then we are going to float a RFP to have a engineering architectural consultant, and then what time they will give us the design. Of course, there will be several iterations between council, us, and this committee, that whatever the design is, and then when that end and when would the construction start and when we can move into the jail. So we will have a rough timeline, and that will also be finalized by June, so that everybody is kept well informed, more transparency into that. So that's what we are working with, implementation plan.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, that's awesome to keep us updated on those negotiations, especially on that financial piece, because that's so important.
Yes.
And it's a great like you said, it's a great concept. Anything else on the implementation plan? Did you have anything else you wanted us to talk about, Jill?
Did you want me to run down the planning team meeting conversations from last week? I can do that right quick, give a summary.
Sure, that'd be great.
Tyler Schroeder let us know that the county received a grant for Project 3, which is the data team. Their plans are to hire the first position, which will be kind of a behind-the-scenes IT person to set up systems. The second position is an informatics front public-facing position that we'll probably interact with more, and who will liaison with the IPRTF, the index committee, that sort of thing. Tyler did say that he is thinking about, before hiring that second position, maybe possibly instead start with a contracted professional who can hit the ground running, so to speak. It will be quicker to get someone on board and get this work started. And part of that work of the contracted professional would be to create the job description of that second position. Kayla is going to set up the scope of work and RFP for that potential contractor and bring that to the IPRTF for review. Regarding the JPOP membership, vacancies are being advertised right now. One position for youth. They're leaning towards that position being a young adult, ages 18 to 20 something. And we're going to connect with some folks in the community, the Northwest Youth Systems, to see how best to fill that position. And I think that's about it.
Thanks, Jill. Anybody else have any questions or comments on the project? Very plural projects. Okay, we'll move on to the proposed county council resolution identifying Whatcom County approaches to the fentanyl emergency. So a little history about this. Councilmember Ellenboss and I have gotten together and we are both pushing hard for declared emergencies on the fentanyl crisis. We developed two resolutions in January, both that passed unanimously. And one was to the governor requesting that the state declare an emergency, and then one to the president and our federal congressional delegation that the feds declare an emergency to the fentanyl crisis. So that was part of my visit to DC. I went kind of with, Councilmember Galloway and I went to the NACO conference, but I was also accompanying Nick Lewis from Lummi, two folks from Nooksack's council were along, and then the Lummi youth were along too. It was a great time we had with them. But Nick and I were really pushing the federal side and talking to many people on the Hill and some of the agencies, and amongst ourselves at the conference. I talked to a lot of people in a lot of different counties that are interested in their counties doing a fentanyl emergency declaration. So I'm going to be doing a big coordination program with that attendee list from the NACO conference. That's my next meeting to start that project. But what we learned is that there's a lot of support for that. And so what Ben and I, then we crafted with help from our staff, a shell of a resolution for the county to declare fentanyl an emergency. And we didn't really have time to get it finished before our last council meeting. We didn't have time to get any, we did some stakeholder work. We met with District Court Judge Rand and one of the Superior Court judges. My mind's a little awash with jet lag. So, but we didn't get to like the sheriff and the prosecutor. So we have extended the vote for that resolution until the end of March, and we're going to do some workshops with those stakeholders in March and late February to discuss the resolution and build it out better. But the IPTRF, I guess the reason this is on our agenda today is the IPTRF was identified as a stakeholder for sure. So what you see is that kind of a shell of a resolution in your packet, and we want that to be able to come before the task force for input in the coming month, I guess, because we want to have a decision by, I think it's March 28th is the council. It's a health board meeting actually that we're having joint with PHAB, and PHAB is going to be a big partner in this as well. So that's kind of where we are with that resolution process, state, federal, and then now we're looking at how we do that in the county. We want to be able to have a measured approach to it. Like, we don't really see the need to activate the EOC like we do in certain emergency situations, but that it all remains to be seen to what the stakeholder process yields. Mike.
Thanks, Barry. And I think you've mentioned this before, but could you maybe just recap what are the outlines of the gains from, or what are we seeking to get, right, when we pass this, and hopefully it does pass, obviously increased attention to issues, but maybe you could just recap for us what you're hoping to get from an emergency declaration?
I think what we were trying to do is get aligned with potential sources should the state and feds do an emergency that align us, and if we have an emergency, we're aligned with their funding streams, or maybe special funding streams that we don't even know about. So I think in one respect, it's making ourselves available for that, for those. And the other thing is just to raise community awareness, get this publicized, that this is such a crisis that Whatcom County is pushing all the way to the president's desk for this. So I guess that's the other beneficiary for it.
No, it makes total sense. I just appreciate you just bringing those two items back up, because it really centers it and why it's so germane, right, to this group, but to all of us. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So that's all I had today for that. But I'm looking forward to these meetings. Going to be pretty quickly happening because Kathy Halka's been scheduling them already, and I think we're might even be all the way scheduled. So more on that later. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Just as to your question, Barry, about this group, about having it at the meeting of the whole, I think it makes total sense. It touches absolutely everything the Behavioral Health Committee does, probably everything every committee does. This is brought up at least once or twice. So just enthusiastic appreciation for what you and Councilmember Ellenboss are doing, and really supportive from the behavioral health subcommittee side. Like I said, this is really just it's kind of swallows most of the topics in the room to some degree. And then many of you it might be involved too, but in the opioid MAC group, right, which is trying to marshal and kind of attune and direct, right, resources that we either have available or ones that we need that will only help in that work. So yeah, thank you for all of your.
And that's certainly on our list of stakeholders too, is the MAC group. So yeah, so y'all have that attached to your packet. Please take a look at it and give us give input, please. We want the input. Raylene.
Thanks, Barry. I know I spoke with Kathy Hulka already on this, and she's going to make sure that Stephanie Kraft is also included. But I think there's some confusion in a lot of different areas with people on, do you invite Raylene or do you invite Stephanie? Invite both of us to any of the proceedings moving forward. At some point, the two of us will figure out who needs to be at what. But a lot of our positions we're still seeing overlap. We're still dividing our budget. And we need to make sure that we're both getting the information out to our teams. So thank you.
Will do. Thanks, Raylene. All right, we'll move to items for the next task force agenda. I think we've been building that as we've been going. Do we have any other thoughts that we want to put on? Jill?
So let you know what's on the agenda right now. It's pretty full. We'll start with the call to order and introductions. We're going to have a number of new members. Barry, I'll get their names and positions to you before the meeting, so you'll have that to refer to. The second item, of course, is election of task force co-chairs. We've talked about that. Number 3 will be IPRTF committee signups. We haven't done a committee sign-up exercise in some time, so we will go through that exercise. And also the index committee time, regular meeting time has changed. Caleb, that's just going to be a matter of procedure to get the IPRTF to approve the time change on there. Justice Project implementation plan, the fentanyl thing, and then Caleb, you had agreed to do a report on the Washington State Joint Legislative Task Force on jail standards at the meeting as well. And then committee reports.
I think that's full, don't you? Jill, it might be easier, and if everybody's in agreement, for me to facilitate this next meeting, because we don't have anything set up at all. Is anyone?
Aye.
You don't object to it?
No, you've got great command of this stuff already, Barry, and it'd be hard for somebody to get up to speed that quickly. I'd really appreciate it personally.
Okay, I'll do that then. Caleb?
I just wanted to mention that the outcome of this state task force to come up with jail standards was a Senate bill. And the Senate bill, I understand, and I haven't checked on it in the last week or so, actually died. So I'm not sure that that's moving forward right yet. I think that we are collectively, from a correction standpoint, all in favor of the jail standards. So we're not sure what's going on with the bill, but we want to see that moving forward. My question with all that is, should we take that presentation off of this next meeting, or do we want to go ahead with a presentation anyway, even though that's been stalled out?
There's no time sensitivity, is there?
No.
So Jill, what do you think? You're our wizard of agendas.
Oh, we can reschedule it to March, or just indefinitely until I get a notice from you, Caleb, that it's ready to go on the agenda. Whatever you think is best, it's fine with me.
Mike?
I know we have a really, really full agenda that might allow for some more time to develop that, Caleb. My other thought, and I don't know, Caleb, what you think about this. Chief Tank was talking about pursuing accreditation for the jail. And while we may not have a statewide standardization effort, we might have our own independent effort. And I think that would be really germane to the task force to hear about that. And I know that's way too fast to call on for that type of information at the very next meeting. So I just wanted to get your take. Would it make sense to maybe talk a little bit about, if we do reschedule it for like a March, let's say, talk a little bit about what was hoped to happen in the state, and hopefully they'll bring it up again next year, but also what Whatcom County is planning to do on its own, regardless of that state plan, I think would be helpful, if you agree.
Yeah, I think that there's a few things that are kind of perfectly timed. As you may be aware, there was a resolution to extend one of the other portions of the county code that was essentially about jail standards. So that resolution to extend was also a topic at the council level. There's a number of things that are kind of all circling around this jail standards conversation. And I think that is a perfectly appropriate thing to do. I was just wondering if since it's not as nearly critical now because that Senate bill died, maybe we put it onto the March agenda. I don't have an issue saying, hey, let's talk about jail standards in Whatcom County specifically. And it will be a, by the way, this was something that happened at the state level as part of the conversation, rather than simply focusing on it entirely for the agenda item. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I will reschedule that tentatively for March then. And thank you, Mike. I already had a note to approach Sheriff Tank to see if he wants to give a presentation on accreditation to the IPRTF. So I'm happy to invite him to do that for March as well. Another, I think, pretty big launch that we haven't heard a whole lot about is the Sheriff's Co-Responder program is now up and running, from what I understand. Perry, you might have a little information on that. So I think it would be good to hear from them and maybe Melora and Perry as well.
Yeah, John Dukes, certainly Melora and I. John Dukes is a supervisor of the alternative response team and also our co-responders working with the sheriff's office. I don't know if everybody here was aware of it. Lonnie Bauman was historically a behavioral health deputy and retired, to my understanding. And this position opened up as a co-responder position was vacant. And Lonnie, although he was employed, actually applied for the position and successfully interviewed and was hired. So honestly, pretty amazing resource, obviously knowledge of protocol and procedure within the sheriff's office and, and et cetera. So we're thrilled to have him, and he's thrilled to be doing the work that he's doing. I found that his other work that he was doing wasn't really fulfilling. So yeah, just wanted to add that piece. So, and I wanted to throw John Duke's name in there as well, Jill. He's a wonderful presenter, and I'm sure would be thrilled to present and brag about ART and the co-responder program, because they're both going very well, particularly with the support of the sheriff's office.
Yeah, this good news. I think our future is really bright. And I think we just got to keep on pressing down on the throttle. Are we ready to go to public comment? I see we have one person out there in our attendee list.
Barry, could I do one good of the order?
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. All right. So Behavioral Health Subcommittee has a meeting coming up next Tuesday. Jill, correct me if any of this stuff is wrong. Jill has been helping get quite a roster together of presenters, and I wanted to bring it up especially to this committee, really to encourage attendance. I think it's going to be amazing. We're really going to talk a lot about the Ann Deacon Center. We've got folks from various different, from user standpoints and provider standpoints. And as the steering committee knows, and the whole task force, we've been talking a lot about this, and we're really hoping that we can get some outcomes about this. Perry, I believe, is also going to be in attendance and is usually tasked with doing this. But I think it'll be a really robust conversation. And so I'm pleased about that roster, and really want to encourage folks to come. Jill, I wouldn't mind if I could reach out to you. I'd like to ping our behavioral health committee members, and I think you normally do, and I wanted to just check in with you. So I don't know if you have a few minutes after to chat super briefly about what that outreach would look like. But we want to encourage our members to come, and want to sincerely invite all of you, because I think it's going to be a really powerful hour and a half next Tuesday. Jill, I see your hand up, and I probably said something wrong, so please help me or correct me if I got it.
No, that was perfect. I just wanted to give you a heads up, Mike. It just popped into my head this minute that next Tuesday is also a county council meeting day. So keep that in mind when anticipating attendees for that. It's going to be a big meeting. We have a lot of confirmations from all the crisis stabilization facility vendors, representatives, and prosecutor's going to be there. The public defender rep, Maya, is going to be there. So, yeah.
Well, I'll definitely go back and watch that recording. I won't be able to attend, obviously, because of the council day, but thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jill. Anything else before we go to public comment? All right, thanks. We do have one person in the attendee list, Jill. Would they like to speak?
Yes, thank you. You're right. We do have one attendee. If you'd like to speak to the committee now, please virtually raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon. And no hands are raised, and I don't see anyone in our conference room.
Okay, well, thanks to that person for hanging with us for this meeting anyway. So, all right, guys, we'll talk later, and thanks for all your hard work. We're adjourned.